Alright, we should be live, everyone. Apologies for the delay. We'll just have to go a little bit faster. I am just in the door, but no substantive changes since I finished researching this morning, so we should still be all set to go. We'll get the link out forthwith and get this road on the show, as they say. Apologies, I have a standing Sunday morning commitment that is occasionally a bit of a thing when you have these early Sunday slates, which do happen from time to time and a bit more frequently in the playoffs. I'll try to be a bit more out in front of the schedule going forward next week. We'll get that link out in a moment and get to work. Unlock some dead air to start us off here. Yay, show. Okay, well, still don't see a link, but I'm gonna go hunting myself. I think, no, that's yesterday's show where I look much less haggard, I might add. I hit the button. I do not see anything. Hey, there it is, I think. Oh, that's me. Boy, that hair is feathered. And it is lethal. Back there. Over to the Twitter. Back over here. Do that. Some of this. Some pasting. Some things. There we are. Twitter freaks out. Where are you? Where are you? Where is your link? Where is your link? Okay. There we go. I've tweeted it. We should be good to go. This slate is tricky. We have some uncertainty with obviously our all-star guards for Golden State potentially out. Right now, I would give Curry somewhere around an 85% chance of playing. I would put Clay closer to 50-50. And in this particular matchup, I would really have to sit there for a minute and decide which guy I think is more important. They really want Klay Thompson out there to not get carved up by James Harden. When Klay is 100% healthy and good to go, this is a below-average matchup for James Harden. The ceiling is there. The ceiling is always there. We got a 90 game out of him against the Warriors. There's never going to be a day where James Harden is playing basketball where you can't roll him out there. But it's not a particularly brilliant spot for him. So one of the nice things about today is we're dealing with two teams that with similar rosters. Obviously, Boston was Suns, Kyrie, and Suns, Gordon Hayward going into that matchup last year. They also, however, didn't have Marcus Smart for the first, I think, 4 games of that series. But these are two teams that played each other 3 and 4 times during the regular season this year and played 7-game series against each other last year in the Eastern Conference semis and the Western Conference finals, respectively. So, there was a lot to look at here, as opposed to yesterday, where there was a lot of inference about what I thought was going to happen, which generally went well. 1-game slates, 2-game slates, there's no room for error. So yesterday ended up being pretty close to perfect, but I had a Butler as I thought of the 176ers piece who would get there. I had Tobias Harris second. Tobias Harris ended up being the guy you wanted on that team, but team no Embiid worked out, and that generally ended up being profitable for a lot of people. But today's a tougher slate. I don't have, off the top of my head, and we'll talk about everyone, any strong play 0 Derek White, play 0 Joel Embiid takes. So a lot will be relative to the ownership that we expect. But there's a lot more nuance, but also, thankfully, a lot more hard evidence to look at as we get into these two brand new series, which is really exciting for me. So I'm going to try to talk as fast as I can and say as many things as I can. Again, if you are in the premium Slack chat, please, you get first preference for questions of your many benefits for being members at awesemo.com. Anyone following along via the Twitter sphere, feel free to send in your questions via Twitter, and we will get going here. So, first game of, I was going to say the evening, the day, clocking in at a hot 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Boston going into Milwaukee. These teams played 3 games together this year, only being in different divisions in the regular season. The Bucks won 2 of those games. There's a lot going on here. So, obviously, again, they met in the postseason last year with somewhat truncated rosters. That was a great series. That was the Terry Rozier, Eric Bledsoe / Drew Bledsoe / I don't know who that is / Scary Terry series. That was it was good watching. It was a good show. Gonna sort of stream of consciousness through this. If I forget to talk about anyone, just go ahead and hammer me with comments and I'll get back to them. In this matchup, this has been much more of a Middleton spot than a Bledsoe spot. Even with better matchups last year, even with just a largely struggling roster at various times, this has worked out to be much more of a Chris Middleton spot than an Eric Bledsoe spot as a supplemental quantity there. If you look at the 10 games these two teams have played, if we're going to count, say, the 7 postseason games last year and the 3 regular season games this year, I believe they both played all 10 games, and I believe Middleton outscored Bledsoe in 8 of them, and sometimes really significantly, and you had some bad games out of Eric Bledsoe. Now, I don't think Bledsoe is remotely out of play. I'm a big Bledsoe stan. Anyone who watches the show knows I spent the entire first round series going how criminally underowned he was and how he cost less than Middleton and was half as owned as Middleton for half the series. It was preposterous. He's really struggled in this spot. Now, to an extent, you expect guys on the Bucks to struggle in this spot. The Celtics are an elite defense with lots of deep bench guys. This is a series in which we're going to see some reasonable amount of Semi Ojeleye. I have him playing 16 minutes a game. In this series, I think he played under a minute in the entirety of the first round series versus the Pacers. But he is one of... There are a lot of guys you can throw out there and try to guard Giannis. But the Celtics legitimately have 2 who are very good at it, including one of the guys who you could argue is best in the world at it, that being Al Horford. The site expenditure and positionality makes it a little interesting talking about who I think we should look at as the top 3 spend-up issues today, where we're talking about Durant and Giannis and Harden. But as a generality, first of all, I think the correct play to start with is Kevin Durant on DraftKings from any raw points perspective. We'll look at ownership, and maybe that'll change things a little bit. But $9,100 Kevin Durant, as of this moment, with the potentiality of Clay out, with the potentiality of a limited Steph Curry, or even potentially an absent Steph Curry, right now ranks out as the best point per dollar guy on DK out of those guys significantly. I have him profiled really, really closely to Harden and Giannis. They are all within a few points of each other, and on FanDuel it's interesting because they all cost about the same. On DK you're saving $900 or $1,000 on Kevin Durant, and depending on how all those odd moments break, whether or not Steph plays, how healthy he is, whether or not Clay plays, how healthy he is, will change that a little bit. But if you're building your lineup right now, assuming the ownership, and I guess I'll just take an early peek ownership DraftKings, assuming the ownership is not predominantly overpowering on him. All right, I think he'll be higher than this. We have him at 37% right now. I think Durant's number will be closer to 50. I imagine he will be slightly higher owned. And again, this is going to change. There is late swap. But right now we have him at less ownership than Harden and Giannis. To me, with what we know at this second, that's just a mistake. It's not really a brilliant matchup for anyone in this series. All four teams that we have out here playing today are very good defensively. There's holes in everyone's game, but no one here puts themselves in a particularly brilliant matchup. So talking more about the Celtics and the Bucks, it'll be interesting to see how many minutes Giannis plays in this series. He averaged basically 40 minutes a game in that 7-game series last year, but again, we were dealing with a different head coach at that point, and Coach Bud has been more reticent, a little more reluctant to throw massive minutes at Giannis this year. I have him at 39 minutes a game in this series. I obviously like him quite a bit. Obviously, the price on DraftKings is extremely appealing, as is Harden's, as is Durant's, as is several guys in the 6-7K range. So we have to make some tough choices today. But I will read between the lines, looking at some coaches' comments, looking at some other things, presume that Detroit sort of, obviously there were the blowouts, and none of the games being terribly close. They won by an average of, 25 or some such. Was sort of an extended regular season, and they took that opportunity to throw, to keep Giannis a little fresher, and knowing that they might need him more in this series. So you could argue that even in close games, and I expect both these games to be reasonably close. We have both favorites, favored by mid to high single digits, 5-7 point favorites. I've seen the lines move around a little bit, but no significant favorites in either the Bucks or the Warriors, and obviously the guys being out for Golden State will keep that line. But both games have almost identical over-under numbers in the 224, 225 range. So if there was a 2-game slate in which I wouldn't be an overwhelming fan of game stacking, I guess it would be this one. It still tactically makes the most sense to, assuming you're not sacrificing too much, and you aren't, especially on DraftKings, because there are a lot of well-priced plays in both games, to be a little heavier on one game. That is just going to, if you extrapolate it out over, 1,000 instances of playing these games, generally be a slightly better strategy. But as comfortable as I ever feel just being largely balanced and ending up with 4 guys from each game, this would be about the slate. I don't have a strong lean towards which game I would stack. I don't have... I project these games to both stay fairly close. At the moment, assuming Klay Thompson plays and is 100%, on DraftKings, I would rank them by literally almost nothing for raw points. Durant is a points per dollar process, and I have Giannis very slightly higher than Harden, but this is presuming a few things. Again, I've had a lot of people talk to me about Harden. If Klay is 100%, this is not a brilliant... in last year's 7-game series, James Harden scored over 55 points 3 times in those 7 games against the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. He never hit 60 in 7 games. I'll just let that fact stand on its own. It's not a terrible spot, and when you're James Harden, as long as you're playing, humanoids, I don't think there really is a terrible spot. But a lot of people have been like, oh, this is a massive spot. You get Klay Thompson out of there, and you have, Alfonso McKinney and Quinn Cook and the B squad rolling around there a lot, and Steph even hobbled a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more of a thing. But I'm guessing Klay plays. If you tell me to build a lineup on DK right now to cover myself, I imagine I start with Durant, Giannis, Chris Paul, giving me sort of hedging a little bit and getting the right pieces of that game. That assumes Klay plays and is in reasonably good shape. If Klay is out, you won't have time because you will have already locked in your Giannis, but then probably taking a pivot, dropping your Draymond or some other mid-priced guy you have in that game down to another value play and upgrading your Chris Paul to James Harden. It's about how I think I would go at it, but make sure if you're playing on DraftKings to especially set your lineups correctly. I know I'm bouncing game to game here, but I'm just going to keep talking when things come to mind. I don't hate playing Steph Curry on FanDuel because you will get 3% owned Steph Curry, and 3% owned Steph Curry is the best Steph Curry. It is obviously risky as fuck, but I think it's much more likely that Steph plays than Clay based on the reported severity of their respective ankle injuries. And with him being technically questionable, I think like nobody goes there because you have to play him over Kyrie, who's almost the exact same price. And again, you have these premier spend-up options on potentially Steph. So I prefer Durant from any sort of raw points question, although it's worth pointing out he's $2,000 more expensive on FanDuel. Curry has been much less usage over the last 4 games. Durant has taken over. Curry is now not 100%. I think it's very likely that Durant outscores Curry, something like 80% of the time, if you asked me to put a number on it right now, because of all the various issues out there. That being said, if you get Curry at like 3 or 4%, he's going to outscore both Kyrie and Durant, which is kind of what you would be looking at when you make that play, more frequently than 1 in 12 times, which is going to be the ratio of his ownership to, say, Durant's or Kyrie's. So I don't despise that play. I don't despise playing Klay Thompson. Shooting guard, again, is a bit different. But playing those questionable guys, if you get a strong lead, like one of the strongest plays we can make here is if at 12:53 you get a source saying, yeah, we think Steph or Klay is going to go, on FanDuel, they become kind of appealing plays. The ownership play would certainly work out there. Points per dollar plays, they're not going to be as good because you would have to reduce any sort of reasonable expectation of their production and even potentially their minutes based on the fact that they aren't 100%. But if you're trying to take down a big tournament, getting somebody like Klay Thompson or Steph Curry on a 2-game slate at single-digit ownership is a pretty sweet spot to be in, and something we should consider if additional news comes out to that end whilst the show is going on. Is it crazy to fade Giannis and Harden? No. You can build a perfectly exciting lineup that has Kyrie, obviously, Durant, Draymond, Middleton, a bunch of mid-price guys, and you don't have to play any of the pretty shitty value we have walking around today. Obviously, there's some studs on both sides with some pretty appealing pricing, and it's making you force into your lineup the, I don't know how many minutes he's going to play of Kevon Looney or Mirotic has some merit on both sides, or Sterling Brown, or just like, well, maybe this 5K guy gets there, and the Haywards and the Jaylen Browns. So if you don't play Giannis or Harden, you can run out a lineup of pretty sexy guys. I think you start with Chris Paul and Chris Middleton in that lineup, who you can easily afford at that point. But you run Chris Paul, Chris Middleton, maybe Capella along there too. Horford would get in that lineup. Kyrie would get in that lineup. And you can build a pretty sexy lineup. So is it insane? No. I think it's honestly pretty reasonable by ownership standards. Someone in chat says, does anyone see Bogut getting more minutes with Capella being a more old-school type center? Kenny G says, yeah, I think he starts. I don't think he starts. I think Draymond Green starts at center. We will see. There is a greater chance he starts if like both Steph and Klay are out, but yeah, Capella is a more old school type center. He's also just a little more fleet of foot than Clint Capella. Clint Capella is just a little bit faster, and that's a little sticky. Again, we were talking the other day in this matchup against Philadelphia, Marc Gasol is kind of the nuts. He makes this series go. If you get Marc Gasol out of there, now I have to play Serge Ibaka backed up by Jonas Valanciunas. That's probably a 7-game series for me. Having Marc Gasol in there made it, for me, Raptors in 5. It's that significant being able to take Embiid out of the game. The Rockets would be really tough for the Raptors, and you might end up getting Gasol played off the floor. So I will disagree. I think they would start Looney before they would start Bogut, and I don't think they do either of those things. I think they start Draymond again. That's my best guess as of right now. So there's that answer of that question that was going on in there. Speaking of which, I've had a couple people today say they think Capella is the top center on the slate, and it's not close. I think that's crazy. I think Al Horford is the top center on the slate, and not close. I would play Horford over Capella. I would play Draymond Green over Capella. There's some risk in that second one. You want him playing center. I think he does play center. I think he's more productive when he plays center. We caught that triple-double ever since it started looking like he was going to get more time at center, because in that last series, which went 6 games, they didn't really go that way towards the end, and you had games where he played no center, and games where he played 8 minutes of center. Towards the end where he was playing 20 minutes of center, his production certainly ticked up, and that just happens to everyone there around the ball more. Giving you some statistic example, if you look at the last 3 years, you have Al Horford playing Giannis 14 times, 7 times in the regular season, 7 times in the postseason. In those 14 games, Al Horford scored under 30 fantasy points once. One time he ended up with something in the mid-20s in a blowout where he played 24 minutes or something. The other 13 games, he scored 30 or more fantasy points. There's no metric I can look at that makes Clint Capella a better play than Al Horford from a raw points perspective. Expected points, expected time, previous history, regular season, previous history, postseason, highest ceiling game, lowest, highest floor game, average production. There's just none for me from a video or statistical standpoint to recommend Clint Capella over Al Horford. I think Clint Capella is fine to play, but if you look at his last 14 games against the Golden State Warriors, I'm not sure he reached 40 more than once. He had one absolutely sick 29 and 21 or whatever stupid the hell 60-something point game. And that can obviously happen. I think he's pretty close back to healthy. Team has some rest. I'm fine with you playing Clint Capella in a tournament, but suggesting that, like, I've had 2 people tell me that from a raw point standpoint they think Capella is overwhelmingly the best center play, and I have no rationale, videotape, stat, anything else to back up that theory. Let's see, other things. So yeah, don't play Semi Ojeleye. Again, I mentioned him because he does a very good job against Giannis, especially if they can slow it down into the half court. But again, I don't think he gets 20 minutes in the series, sort of similar to Zaire Smith yesterday, where 11 people asked about, and I said I think it was more likely he got 0 minutes than 20 minutes, and he didn't touch the court until blowout time, so hopefully we steered a couple people in the right way there. Yeah, don't play Semi Ojeleye. So I'm waiting on starting lineups. Starting lineups are going to tell us a lot here. Let me reset up my alerts and everything. Shut everything off when I left this morning. Okay. So the Bucks will start who we presumed the Bucks will start. That's fine. But the Celtics lineup is going to be really interesting. I will go 70-30. They continue to start Aaron Baines at center. To follow around Brook Lopez, basically, and continue to start Giannis and Horford, basically, at the 4. Yeah, Showdown does make that interesting. We'll get there in a second. So, but the starting lineup is going to tell us a lot here. Baines helps a lot defensively. He's just another big-ass guy to be near the rim, and Giannis scores all his points coming in at the rim, and having him out there helps with that, and that's why I think they do with that. They trust their team to be able to manage the offense enough. They're just going to do what they can to stop Giannis from being insane, and so I think they keep Aaron Baines out there. But, you know, offensively, the easiest play here is to go small. Kyrie can through pick and rolls and individually and just the swaps and the ISOs, you get better matchups that way, and you can just sort of eat Brolo. There's some risk in this matchup, which has been pretty difficult for Brolo as well. I don't think I want to take that risk game 1 just because he isn't priced that well. And again, I'd rather Horford, I'd rather Draymond. I'd have some shares in 150, but a fairly nominal amount. You know, I think there's a chance that some of these games end up going small, and certainly Brook Lopez is going to be the first casualty there. But yeah, there's a chance, you know, if this game goes small, you get, you know, Gordon Hayward starting, Marcus Morris playing more time, Semi Ojeleye getting more time on the court. So Giannis is a monster on both ends of the court. Again, this series. I picked the Bucks in 6. But it's not one of the ones I feel better about. We did pretty well with the series picks in the first round, excepting Portland thrashing OKC. But the two things Giannis doesn't do terribly well is A, shoot the ball, which admittedly is a core skill playing basketball, but the second is like maneuvering around screens. And Boston does a fairly good job of isolating him in that way. And watching their offense again throughout this year and seeing all that time, he's just a giant dude. And so you tend to get a lot of three-pointers. I don't see them coming at the rim a lot, especially if the lineups stay large. You're going to look at this team jacking up a lot of threes. I like Horford a lot. I think his minutes trend up pretty significantly here. I guess I won't go into it further because we don't have a super amount of time here. Although a couple of people have said I worry about Horford foul trouble guarding Giannis. Someone can double check me here, but I'm fairly certain in those 14 games we just referenced, being every time they've been on the court together in the last 3 years, 7 postseason, 7 regular season, I don't think Horford has ever gotten a 5th foul, let alone a 6th. If someone is bored and wants to look that one up, you can check me. But no, one of the ways in which he is brilliant at it is he doesn't foul him, which is not easy to do. Is this an even more super saiyan, superhuman mode Giannis than we've seen? Yeah, but again, I believe in Al Horford. Yeah, so again, talking about the whole Giannis Harden thing a little bit, there is a minutes concern here. Right now I have them even, playing the exact same number of minutes, and that gives them almost an exact same projection for me. Klay Thompson really pivots it for me. If Klay Thompson plays and is reasonably decent, especially at what appears like it's going to be lower ownership in what has been a somewhat tougher matchup for James Harden, I probably slightly prefer Giannis. If Klay Thompson is out, that's probably enough for me to pivot it to James Harden. And again, we almost certainly won't have that news in time, but we may have some inkling as what's going to go there. Mirotic makes a pretty interesting pivot for me. Or FanDuel, where he's a small forward, which is kind of silly because that almost never happens. Although you could see some of that in this series, where you actually see them push up and go super large and get an MRI on Klay. Yeah, this I had already heard, but just tweeted by Adrian Wojnarowski. An MRI on the right ankle of Klay Thompson returned clean. His status on Game 1 will be clear after his pregame workout, but right. So like Steph is gonna play. Horford has not reached over 4 personal right. So yeah, he manages to do an extremely good job without fouling. Now, this doesn't take Giannis out of play whatsoever. It limits his fantasy point production for me, where in the last series I had him at, I think I expected him at 1.75. I have him around 1.55 in this series. But there's nothing wrong with that. 1.55, if you're playing 36 minutes, ends up netting you out somewhere around 55 fantasy points. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, especially at $10,000 on DK. Pardon me, I was outside all morning in my having a little trouble bleeding. Let's see. Other things to talk about. So, who else in these early games? So, Kyrie Irving, on both sites, I'm cautiously optimistic for. I like Kyrie Irving. Again, let's take a look at some ownership here. I have a feeling I'll want more than what we have him projected for. We have him projected for 34%. The roster construction can be difficult. In one roster, I imagine I have trouble getting him in there because I want to play Kevin Durant on DK. And I probably want to play Giannis or Harden over him, and it's tough to get him in there as the third wheel. But I'm not really going to have any issue with any $8,300 Kyrie Irving. I am projected to average about 46 points a game in this series. That's just fine, obviously, at $8,300. I do think the ceiling is a little more limited than all those other players we're talking about. If you talk about Giannis or Harden and Durant, which one of these guys is, or Kyrie, which one of these guys is least likely to give me 75? It's Kyrie, though that's in play. But I hesitantly like Kyrie. I like him on FanDuel. In any raw points per dollar sense, he ranks a little better for me by just a hair than Chris Paul, than the other point guards in play today. Certainly than Bledsoe. Jaylen Brown was exceptional in this series last year, even with a slightly better defensive staff in there. We'll talk about value in a little bit. I'll make a point of discussing that for a little bit. I very hesitantly prefer Jaylen Brown over Gordon Hayward, who has looked much better recently. I slightly prefer Jaylen Brown on both sites. Again, we're obviously talking about a different position on FanDuel. But I kind of want to use my small forwards on FanDuel a lot of the time for punts or Giannis or Durant. So I'm kind of okay playing Jaylen Brown. 5,100 on FanDuel is a pretty good price. I'm a slightly bigger fan of playing Jaylen Brown. There is a small chance Gordon Hayward starts. That wouldn't change this opinion for me on either site. You save $800 on FanDuel. I think it's $500 on DK. Either way, I slightly prefer that. Will Dre start at the 5? That is my current. Very not confident. I didn't see Livingston catching the start over Cook. I didn't see a lot of things happening in that last game. So I don't feel like I have a great feel for exactly what Curry is doing, why, and when. I start Draymond at the 5 pretty happily. Capella is not a huge. There's no reason to start anyone else at the 5. Let me rephrase. The reason to start someone else at the 5 is Clay doesn't play, and you're trying to put your best guys at the court. So it's like, okay, I would rather put more minutes on Kevon Looney and Andrew Bogut than I would like to put on Alfonso McKinney and Quinn Cook, because you think they're your better players. And in that matchup, that's the case. So it helps us get more minutes if we start Dre at the 4. So that is a real possibility. But if everyone is healthy, yeah, I would expect, and to me, tactically, the best idea would be to start Draymond at the 5. So that is currently what I expect at this point. All right, so just going player by player a little bit here. I'd probably be a little over on Kyrie Irving. I like him. I feel like the floor is pretty safe. I do think he is the straw that stirs the drink here. I would slightly rather Jaylen Brown than Gordon Hayward on both sites. I think Gordon Hayward is just fine. There is a very real chance he can get 40 for you here and be a key piece of this lineup. Points per dollar, I have Jaylen Brown a little better. Raw points, I have Gordon Hayward. So if, for example, Yahoo doesn't make a big distinction there, or you have, or price isn't an issue looking at one of them as a last player, I would probably go with Gordo at that point. We will know. I presume Baines will start. Again, I think I'm about 70-30 on Baines continuing to get the start there. He's absolutely fine as a punt at 3,600 or 3,400. Value is kind of shit today. We've had a couple days recently where it's just like, one of these $3,500 guys gets you 20 and they're brilliant. And on the showdown slate, you have, Bellinelli being in the best possible lineup, getting you 13. And so, you can't isolate your value plays alone and just be like, I don't want this guy. I think he's going to get me 16 for $3,500, and that's just not good enough. And you're right, that's just not good enough in a vacuum or on a larger slate, but it also allows you to be playing Giannis instead of Kyrie, or Harden instead of Kyrie, and so you have to, correlate those two things. There's a reasonable chance your best possible lineup has Durant and Harden and Giannis, or Durant and one of those guys, and to make that lineup work, you have to spend down in some places. So none of these things exist in a vacuum, which is something we should consider. Marcus Morris very much in play on DK at $4,400. Would rather not go there on FanDuel. I think there's better options even at that somewhat barren position. Terry Rozier playable on FanDuel as a drop. Don't really want to go there on DK. I would rather play by any raw point sensibility Chris Middleton at 62 than Eric Bledsoe at 63 on DraftKings. There's nothing wrong with playing Bledsoe in a tournament. Again, one of my favorite guys. It does not look like a great spot for him either on video or statistically looking back at games. I'm not in any way surprised to see 45 out of Eric Bledsoe today. So again, we have their expected ownership at, I mentioned we have Middleton close to top. We have Middleton at the top the most owned play at the slate at 48%. We have Bledsoe at 38%. I still, if those numbers are close to accurate, will prefer Chris Middleton. So it's 48 and 28, 48 and 24. That's about the point at which I would be roughly even between those two options. I'm going to finish this game real quick, and then we will go on to talking other things. I would rather play Sterling Brown than Pat Connaughton or George Hill for value. On DK, obviously, George Hill is the cheapest of those by, I think, 400 on Connaughton and 500 on Sterling Brown. I'm fine if that saving that money does something for you. Not hard to imagine, Bledsoe struggling, etc., and so on. I'm fine with Mirotic on either site. I think this is a matchup in which you could see, Brolo get played off the floor or struggle a little bit, and that by extension leads to Giannis playing more functional center and Horford playing more functional center. And that leads potentially to a few more minutes out of Mirotic and Ersan Ilyasova. I would rather play Mirotic than Ersan Ilyasova in this series. And, I'm pretty sure he gets 18 minutes. Could get 24. That's about as much as you could possibly hope for. But the ownership there should obviously be pretty nice. But it's going to vary a bit site by site. But cashy generally on those sites, I'm going to feel best playing Sterling Brown, especially on FanDuel, where 4,200 on FanDuel is very nice relative to 4,200 on DK. Going to read through some questions real quick and see if we have missed anything. Thoughts on Tatum today? He's fine. I don't particularly like the matchup for him. I would generally rather play Hayward or Brown, who I project similarly for, $1,000 less. It's a 2-game slate, so any player who you expect to see 38 whatever minutes is in play, and I'm not going to look at any lineup with Tatum in it and be like, oh, that's just wrong. That guy should have paid up there. I mean, there's certainly Tatum can get there. From a raw point standpoint, wouldn't be one of the guys I'm targeting. He's just too close to the range of guys like Bledsoe and Middleton and Draymond and Horford, where I don't really want to play him next to Horford, and I suspect Horford is one of the guys I would be most overweight on today, so I don't think I would have much Tatum, but there's no problem playing Jason Tatum, and he's a guy I would look at a little more, especially if there was a non-Horford lineup I was looking to tweak. Semi Ojeleye is $1,000 on DK Showdown. Would you play him there? I don't think I would, for two reasons. One, there is value to the slot. Now, that value is proportionately less on Showdown than it is on the main slate because of the greater ratio of players you have to players on the slate. But you frequently hear people say stuff like, I'm going to play this $1,000 player. If he gets 9 fantasy points, that's still 9 points per dollar, and that's good. No, that's not good. That's not how that works. I won't go into the whole math thing right now, but that's not actually accurate. You need production. He played, I believe, 1 game in the Pacers series of the 4, and played, I think, under a minute. I literally don't think he played a minute in that series. I could be confused, but it doesn't really matter. He's a bad fantasy basketball player, and this is not a good matchup. And if he plays today, which I think is about 80% likely, I still don't think he plays out of the teens, so my projection for him would literally be something like 14 minutes and 7 fantasy points. So, and there's some chance that he just zeroes you out. So in one Showdown lineup, no, I don't think I would play any Semi Ojeleye. Thoughts on Looney/Tatum at power forward on FanDuel? Yeah, I'm fine with that. Power forward on FanDuel is particularly wicked. You have Draymond, who is 8,100, which I don't hate, and he's probably the only power forward I literally look at his price and go like, yeah, I think that could reasonably work. But Tatum, again, as mentioned, probably the second best power forward by price. If you're not punting with Looney, who I cannot be at all, like, it's FanDuel, so Looney ends up being a better play than Tatum because of the, if he fails, which will happen 60-something% of the time, well, you get to throw him away, and hopefully your other punts got there, or you didn't have other punts. So Looney is probably a better play than Tatum. But as far as ability to produce relative to their salary, the best guy on the slate is Draymond, and the second best guy is Jason Tatum. I mean, power forward is a wreck. Draymond 81, good. I'm fine with that. I think he starts at center. I have him projected for around 40 fantasy points. That's just fine. Jason Tatum at 64. Fine, not great. I'm projected for a little under 30 fantasy points, but that doesn't break the bank at 6,400. That's fine. PJ Tucker at 63. Stop. Fine on DK, 45, 46, wherever he normalized out there, but 63 on FanDuel is steals and blocks are worth 3, and I love me some PJ Tucker. Marcus Morris at 56. Again, that's just too expensive. I would rather play the Tatum price. I'd rather play the Horford price. Well, Horford's a center on FanDuel, but you get my point. I'd rather play the Green price. DK 4,400. That's about right for Marcus Morris. That feels just fine. 56 on FanDuel, that's too expensive. And then you're into punts, which is Ilyasova and Looney and Fareed. Yeah, I have no issue with your Tatum and Looney power forward. Who starts for the Golden State Warriors if Clay is out? It has been several different guys. I think the most likely guy is Alfonso McKinney. If he was like $1,000 on Showdown, I'd much more happily go there. He would have a projection for me of like 19 minutes and 13 and a half fantasy points, or double what you could get out of Semi Ojeleye as far as production. So I would think McKinney is the most likely guy, but you could see Sean Livingston out there running at the 2. You could see Quinn Cook out there. You could see it's going to be a mess, and regardless, the minutes are going to get spread out. Steve Kerr constantly does this. We had the Sean Livingston starting the other day. People are like, whoa, how many minutes does he get now? He had been getting 12 minutes a game. I said I think he got 19. I'm actually going to look. I don't remember how many minutes he played in that game, but I was very, very wary on Sean Livingston. I think I ended up projecting him for 20 or 21 minutes and 13 and a half fantasy points. Like, I was very, very wary on him due to the fact that Steve Kerr just a couple more minutes go on to the other prime starters, and everything else just gets spread around onto. You get 20 minutes of this guy, and Jerebko gets a few extra minutes, and they just don't be like, oh, this guy is out, this guy's going to now play 32 minutes. That literally never happens. I probably shouldn't waste this minute on this, but I'm really curious how that finished out, and for some reason, I can't remember offhand. Where is it? He played 17 minutes and 20 seconds. Wow. Took 5 shots, made 1 of them, had 4 assists and a rebound, and yeah, that's about what I expected. So this being long way around of saying, whoever it is who starts for Klay Thompson, if Klay Thompson is out, don't, make a mess in your panties over it. It is not going to be any sort of brilliant play regardless. $1,000 Showdown, all that stuff, yeah, that obviously works, but some concern there. So additional questions. Injury aside, is this a good matchup for Curry? No. It's fine, but it's not a... This Houston team has been very, very, very good defensively. They are, looking at any reasonably short sample size over the last series, the last month of the regular season, they've really figured it out defensively. And D'Antoni and Harden, whose defense has been good, really aren't getting enough credit, but they're really, really good. So, no, it's not what I would consider a good matchup for Steph Curry. We talked about that a little bit. Do you guys think Sterling Brown shits the bed? It's a very real possibility. I have him projected right now for 25 minutes, which I'm not that confident in, and 18 fantasy points. I like it a lot on FanDuel because you can throw it away. DraftKings, I'm not thrilled with it, but I'm really not thrilled with any of the value. Yahoo Cash Bledsoe, Tatum and Looney, or George Hill, Draymond, and Capella. I would play George Hill, Draymond, and Capella. Any betting takes for the games today? I'm sorry. Well, if you're... you can place the bet now, and the injury news is here. I may do you on this one. I may put my undefeated streak on the line. We are 5-0 in postseason sports bets. Yeah, I will take the over in the late game. I think Houston and Golden State get for the over. Yeah, I have this game likely to... I think that line is too short by about 2 or 3 points. So yes, I will take the over on the late game. Putting our 6th sports bet out there. I won't actually bet it because I'm stupid and because I could actually do that. But we're going to put the risk out there. I like the over in Houston and Golden State. Other more questions from the premium channel in case I missed anything. How do you feel about Iggy today? I love Iggy. I apologize. Thanks. I like Iguodala a lot. The upside is much more evident. He's priced extremely well, obviously, on DK. On FanDuel, that they have him priced fairly appropriately with the possibility that guys are going to be out. $5,700 on FanDuel. That is a rough go. And in play, you want guys to be out. If I'm building one lineup right now, I'd really have to think about him or Klay Thompson at their prices. It'd be close for me, though, because of the ownership thing with Klay. But yeah, DK, I think $4,300 Iguodala is brilliant. Thank you for bringing my attention to a guy I did not mention. Sterling Brown will 100% suck hard. Well, that should get him a raise. Paul Draymond or Harden Looney? Without sight or further context, I would probably play Paul and Draymond most times. There are other studs to pay up for. Paul gives you the most immediate leverage. I'll guess you're playing on DraftKings. $6,900 is a price I like quite a bit there. This is a better matchup for Chris Paul in that last series. I said I thought he would average somewhere between 37 and 38 points a game and have one spike game of over 50, and that's basically exactly what happened. In this series, I have him a couple points better than that. I have him averaging about 40. I like Chris Paul quite a bit, and there's guys to buy other than James Harden. You get some leverage on the field. So I think I would probably run your Paul Draymond side. They're both are guys who I think are underpriced and have a real upside. So there was your betting take. If you go small, do you see any opportunity for Kenneth Faried? I don't have a problem with Kenneth Faried. Mostly on FanDuel, I prefer him because he is very droppable at that point. DK, I don't think he's an unreasonable play. You will get him at, I will guess, 4% owned. And your more likely path to success is issues with Capella, which is certainly a possibility. Although Curry and Clay being hurt reduces the foul trouble issues for Capella significantly, making it really unlikely. Like, I guess Kevon Looney can get multiple fouls on the guy, but he's not that involved in. Like, it's just it's a little less likely it's going to go. But I'm fine with you playing Kenneth Faried. It's not something I would advocate for. But favorite DK play around 4K. Andre Iguodala, if I can have him at 4,300. There's optimism that Thompson will play Game 1, but bigger question is whether there will be limitations on his mobility, sources tell ESPN. Okay. Is Kenneth Faried a viable punt on FanDuel? Yes. What's the ownership for Tatum? On DraftKings, we currently have Tatum projected at, I'll guess we have somewhere in the high teens to low. Actually, on the short side, it's going to be like 30. Tatum, 35%. Which is another reason that I'm happy to get away. Let me refresh and make sure that number hasn't changed, though I can't think of a reason it would have, as nothing has functionally really changed. You know. Right now we have Clay at, 16% on DraftKings. So yeah, it's 2 games late. You got to make some ownership plays if you want to take down the whole prize. Mirotic or House on FanDuel? House in cash, Mirotic in tournaments for me. What kind of role does Iggy play in this series? The role he plays, the whole series. You can look at some extra minutes, some extra usage, but he's out there to be an excellent on-ball defender, very good system defender. Get open for threes and, the death lineup, the Hamptons 5. So fairly similar to be a very competent backup. But there's, I sort of like Iguodala today in the same way that I like Al Horford. Al Horford is not, super offensive weapon. This isn't the greatest offensive spot for him. But he's just going to be around the ball a ton. He's going to play 35 minutes, give or take 2, and be sitting on Giannis for a lot of that. That's just a lot of time for a guy with a great nose for the ball to be around the ball. So I project him for north of 2 steals and 2 blocks. Which obviously adds to the floor, and then if it goes small, but even if it doesn't, he's more active in the offense. It's just going to contribute in a lot of ways. It's a very hard to fail spot for him. If you have no Steph or less Steph, or no Clay or less Clay, or worse Clay, You're just looking at more time, more usage, more shots, more of a lot of everything for Iguodala. I have him projected for a touch north of 30 fantasy points today. 4,300 on DK. That makes life pretty easy for you. Anyone else have 3 or 4 punts on FanDuel? Yeah, it's interesting because the trepidation when you build that kind of lineup for most people is, oh no, I'm super worried about whether or not, are we literally that close to lock? Wow, I guess I should have handled things a little faster. I had no idea we got that close to lock. Wow. Oops. That's what I was. Yeah, I guess 50 minutes is not enough. So there we, oh, I guess let's look at some, Morris starting. Nice timing on that one, world. Way to wait for things to go. So apparently, at lock, which for the early game is a bit of a dick move there, Celtics. Yeah, sorry to I have like 12 tweeted questions I did not get to. Someone just hit me with a Hayward or Gordon or whatever question. I cannot do anything for you, and nor can you do anything with Hayward, Gordon, or anything else. For we are locked, my friend. Just snuck up on, I was going to say us, but me pretty significantly there. Some FanDuel ownerships real quick. Al Horford, 38%. Yeah, not surprised. Feeling okay about that. Nikola Mirotic, 37%. Yep. Sterling Brown, 32%. Yep. Jaylen Brown, 26%. I like that. Kyrie Irving, 31%. That feels pretty good. Eric Bledsoe, 36%. That feels pretty high. Marcus Morris listed as a starter ahead of Aaron Baines. Will update. That's not locked in stone. But shits on your Baines shares more than anything else. It's actually a fairly neutral move. There, but they're going small, so good for your Mirotic, bad for your Brook Lopez, good for your Giannis, good for your Horford. Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but that's I feel like LaMarcus Aldridge, in which I should really know what time is on the clock. Aaron Baines, 15% on FanDuel. Might not play. Real chance he doesn't play. I think he plays. I think he plays 13 minutes or something now, but there's a chance Aaron Baines may spend the day on the bench grooming his beard. Giannis, 62% on FanDuel. Let's take a look at some DraftKings ownership again. Woefully unprepared. I appreciate the compliments, everyone. But yeah, I should keep a better eye on the clock. Thankfully, I don't think it really cost us anything, though I didn't do as much analysis on the second game as I'd want to. Let me think, if I'm sticking fork in myself, what did I fuck up by not talking about the second game enough? I guess by illusion, spent a lot of time talking about Clay and Steph and how to treat them and guys who would get in there. But for your early analysis, the big things were, I like Durant a ton. I had him project. No, I guess I covered everything super relevant. I said I like Draymond. That was key. I said I thought he started. That was key. I said Steph and Clay were interesting on FanDuel, even right now. That seems good. Talked about who I thought started. Talked about the matchup a fair bit. Talked about Harden's performance in the series. Talked about, no, I guess I did okay. Okay, I was worried because I really, went through every player in the early game and didn't quite do that for the late game, but we really, I think, by extension, sort of covered everything. So I don't feel too bad thinking about it. But I literally went talk about stuff, go through every guy in the first game, talk about stuff, and didn't really go through my notes and talk about the second game. But by extension, we spoke about 90% of it. Marcus Morris will start. Yeah, so good for you if you bet the over on the first game, which I thought about as well. That would pick the line on this up a few points. So if somewhere you can bet before the tip and they're still giving you that same 224 or something, this would increase the line for me. But good for Horford, good for Giannis, bad for Brolo, neutral for Marcus Morris, good for Gordon Hayward, good for Jaylen Brown. They're each looking at a minute or two extra here. Bad for Aaron Baines. would be the brief breakdown there. Not that probably most of us can do anything about it at this point. Let's look at some DK ownership, which will be hopefully instructive and interesting. What's big on DK? It was like 350, right? 350. Wonder if they filled it. They did fill it. Good. It's really exciting to have fantasy basketball, and I get to do more shows, and I like doing shows. Let's see what we have to see. Horford 33%. Oops, I wet my panties. That's too little. I don't know what to tell you. That's too little. Number 1 owned, Giannis, 50. Yep, okay. Which was about what we had Middleton for. We had Giannis for about... We basically switched the Giannis and Middleton ownership, but we had them both in the 40s, and they are both in the 40s. Giannis, 49. Yeah, very close to what it should be. Middleton, 42. Yep, I'm fine with that. Horford, 34, 33.48, so 33. Rounding down. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. That price is too good. Forward eligible if you're somehow center stack. That's just too good. Kyrie Irving, 31. That's really good at 8,300. That's fairly safe, and there's an upside to be had there. I like that number. Tatum, 30. I would have less. I don't have an issue with you playing Tatum. He's not that expensive. There is a ceiling that could certainly come out here. The position, it's a decent spot against the Bucks, whereas the micro matchup, going small, a minor cookie for him. So yeah, I'm fine with it. I would have less, largely because of how much of a fan of Horford I am, especially now that he's center. I'm pretty moist over that. Jaylen Brown, 28%. Yeah, we have Jaylen Brown 28 and Gordon Hayward 17. At those numbers, I would have preferred Gordon Hayward as a GPP play. I have him slightly preferential points per dollar. So they both profile extremely similarly, but it, 28% Brown and 17% Hayward. I kind of hope Hayward does badly because this ownership will persist, and then next game we'll get to pivot there. Marcus Morris, 27.5. Yep, 44%, and those people should feel safer now. Again, the usage is going to suffer in there with the starters. Mirotic, 19.5%, more than I would have thought where you can't drop him. FanDuel obviously was a bit more because, again, the position was, well, not terrible because you have Durant and Giannis, but limited, we'll say. So that's a bit more than I would have thought there. I don't feel too bad about it. Again, high teens seems safe. Low 20s, now much more likely, with them presumably going a bit small. Now, Milwaukee, Coach Bud does not have to respond in type. He does not have to be like, we're playing small? Okay, you called it, we're playing small. There are going to be some defensive issues. Look for Boston to step out to a bit of a lead here, and Brook Lopez to warm a seat for a bit. Hayward, 17, I'd have more. Sterling Brown, 16, feels about right. Ersan, 14.6. Fine. George Hill, 12. Fine. Connaughton, 11. Fine. Rozier, 10. Don't think I can get there. Playing small, in theory, a little cookie for him, but I don't think I can get there. Bane, 7%. So sorry. Tony Snell, 0.3. That might be appropriate. Semi Ojale, 0.3. Do it, Doug. 0.2, Tim Frazier. Daniel Tice, 0.2. DJ Wilson, 0.16. RJ Hunter, 0.11. Is that Malcolm Brogdon? We may get him later this series. Yeah, Malcolm Brogdon, 0.08. Congratulations. You have played yourself. I don't know. Anything else to say? I think you see some Pau Gasol in this series. I'm kind of excited to see some Pau Gasol. Less likely now that we're going super small. But I'm interested to see that happen. I just, he's got my old man basketball game. On a good day, I am Nikola Jokic when I play ball. Slightly smaller version. On your average day, I am Pau Gasol. On a bad day, I am Vlade Divac. Some Marcus Gasol in there too. But I can shoot, I can pass, but I Pau Gasol, one of my spirit animals. I like to see him out there going, well, you are so unathletic. You're not terribly slow, but you're getting it done. It's the thing that makes me happy. Also, shout out for Marcus Smart, 0.001 person Owned Celtics for start Irving, Brown, Tatum, Morris, and Horford. So there it is, my friends. The game should be underway within moments. I'll be around the premium Slack certainly in 2.5 hours or so to discuss some of the showdown options that we have. Hopefully you are successful. And tomorrow, more goodies, more shows. And so with that, tweet me your approbation or your condemnation. And my pleasure as always. Bonne chance.